Removing and replacing parts. HP Compaq Pro 6305 Microtower PC.
Tools you need. To remove and replace parts in this device, you should ideally have the following tools on hand: an anti-static wrist strap, a Phillips screwdriver, a flat-bladed pry tool, long-nose pliers, a flathead screwdriver, a Torx screwdriver, a triangular pry tool, a pair of tweezers, thermal grease and cleaning alcohol, a suction cup, a cuticle stick, a SIM tray eject pin.
How to replace the access panel. Removal.
Loosen the two captive thumb screws that secure the access panel to the chassis. Rotate the access panel away from the chassis and remove.
Replacement.
Slide the lip on the front end of the access panel under the lip on the front chassis guide rail. Rotate the back end of the access panel against the chassis. Tighten the two thumb screws that secure the access panel to the chassis.
How to replace the front bezel. Removal.
Remove the access panel. Pull out on the three tabs on the right side of the bezel. Rotate the bezel away from the chassis and remove it.
Replacement.
Insert the three hooks on the left side of the bezel into the slots on the chassis. Rotate the bezel against the chassis and press until it snaps into place.
How to replace the optical drive. Removal.
Remove the access panel and front bezel. Disconnect the power and data cables from the drive. Pull out on the drive release latch and slide the drive out of the drive bay. Note: if the replacement drive does not include guide screws, remove and reuse the screws from this drive or use the spare screws provided on the drive cage.
Replacement.
Align the guide screws on the drive with the guide slots and slide the drive into the bay until it snaps into place. Connect the data and power cables to the drive.
How to replace the hard drive. Removal.
Remove the access panel. Disconnect the power and data cables from the drive. Pull out on the drive release latch and slide the drive out of the drive bay. Note: if the replacement drive does not include guide screws, remove and reuse the screws from this drive or use the spare screws provided on the drive cage.
Replacement.
Align the guide screws on the drive with the guide slots and slide the drive into the bay until it snaps into place. Connect the data and power cables to the drive.
How to replace the media card reader. Removal.
Remove the access panel and front bezel. Disconnect the media card reader cable from the system board. Pull out on the release latch and slide the media card reader out of the drive bay. Note: if the replacement media card reader does not include guide screws, remove and reuse the screws from this drive or use the spare screws provided on the drive cage.
Replacement.
Align the guide screws on the media card reader with the guide slots and slide it into the bay until it snaps into place. Connect the media card reader cable to the system board.
How to replace the front fan assembly. Removal.
Remove the access panel. Disconnect all cables from the hard drive and system board that are routed over the front fan assembly. Remove any cables from the clips on the fan assembly and push them aside. Disconnect the front fan cable from the system board. Pull out on the retaining tab that secures the top of the fan assembly to the chassis. Rotate the assembly forward and then lift it straight up and out of the chassis.
Replacement.
Position the front fan assembly at an angle and align the tabs at the bottom of the assembly with the slots in the chassis. Lower the assembly into the slots until it stops, and then rotate it back until it snaps into place. Connect the front fan cable to the system board. Replace the cables into the clips on the fan assembly. Reconnect all cables that are routed over the fan assembly to the hard drive and system board.
How to replace the front I/O assembly. Removal.
Remove the access panel and front bezel. Disconnect the front USB and front audio cables from the system board. Remove the assembly cables from the clip on the fan assembly. Remove the Torx T15 screw that secures the assembly to the front of the chassis. Slide the assembly toward the top of the chassis to disengage the tabs at the bottom of the assembly housing. Pull the assembly and cables out of the opening in the chassis.
Replacement.
Thread the front audio and USB cables into the opening in the chassis. Place the assembly into the opening and slide it toward the bottom of the chassis to engage the tabs at the bottom of the assembly housing. Replace the Torx T15 screw that secures the assembly to the front of the chassis. Replace the assembly cables into the clip on the top of the fan assembly. Connect the front audio and front USB cables to the system board.
How to replace the power switch LED assembly. Removal.
Remove the access panel and front bezel. Disconnect the power switch LED assembly cable from the system board. Remove the assembly cable from the clip on the front fan assembly. Press the retaining tabs on the left side of the power switch and rotate it out of the opening on the front of the chassis. Guide the assembly cable through the opening and remove the assembly.
Replacement.
Guide the assembly cable through the opening on the front of the chassis. Insert the tabs on the right side of the power switch into the opening and press the power switch against the chassis until it clicks into place. Replace the assembly cable into the clip on the front fan assembly. Connect the power switch LED assembly cable to the system board.
How to replace the speaker. Removal.
Remove the access panel. Disconnect the speaker cable from the system board. Remove the speaker cable from the clip on the front fan assembly. Remove the two Torx T15 screws that secure the speaker to the chassis. Lift the speaker off of the brackets on the chassis wall and remove.
Replacement.
Place the speaker into the brackets on the chassis wall. Replace the two Torx T15 screws that secure the speaker to the chassis. Replace the speaker cable into the clip on the front fan assembly. Connect the speaker cable to the system board.
How to replace the memory. Removal.
Remove the access panel. Push down and out on the memory socket latches to release the memory module. Pull the memory module up and out of the socket.
Replacement.
Ensure that the memory socket latches are pushed down and away from the memory socket. Match the notch on the memory module with a key in the memory socket. Push the module down firmly into the socket until the latches snap into place and the module is fully seated.
How to replace the system fan. Removal.
Remove the access panel. Disconnect the fan cable from the system board. Remove the 4 Phillips head screws that secure the fan to the back of the chassis. Remove the fan from the chassis.
Replacement.
Position the fan against the chassis. Replace the 4 Phillips head screws that secure the fan to the back of the chassis. Connect the fan cable to the system board.
How to replace the PCIe card. Removal.
Remove the access panel. Disconnect any cables attached to the PCIe card. Pull up on the PCI retention clamp and rotate it back until fully open. Lift straight up on the card to remove it from the slot. Note: if the PCIe slot has a locking tab, push out and hold the locking tab while lifting the card. Important: if you're not replacing the PCIe card, cover the open slot on the PCI bulkhead with a metal slot cover.
Replacement.
If you're installing a new PCIe card, remove the slot cover from the appropriate slot on the PCI bulkhead. Align the connectors on the card with the slot on the system board. Press down on the card until it is fully seated. Rotate the PCI retention clamp down over the PCI bulkhead. Connect any cables to the PCIe card.
How to replace the power supply. Removal.
Remove the access panel and front fan assembly. Disconnect the power cables from the system board, noting their location for reinstallation. Remove the 4 Torx T15 screws that secure the power supply to the back of the chassis. Press the release latch on the chassis pan and slide the power supply away from the back of the chassis. Lift the power supply out of the chassis.
Replacement.
Align the power supply with the guides in the chassis. Slide the power supply to the back of the chassis. Replace the 4 Torx T15 screws that secure the power supply to the back of the chassis. Connect the power cables to the system board.
Find more helpful videos on our HP Support YouTube channel.